Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Wednesday night, July the 28th. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And my chat room is open. If anybody would like to sit in there, that's great. And I just wanted to continue talking about an article, a PDF actually, that I found. And it's called... It's regarding child abuse and neglect. It's from www.childwelfare.gov and the Child Welfare Gateway. And it's a great article. We're on page 25. Want to continue on where we left off on Monday night. And we were looking at, the different types of neglect, physical neglect, emotional neglect, and whatnot, and just kind of reading through this PDF. And this PDF is awesome. I'll just go to the actual name of it. It is called... A Coordinated Response to Child Abuse and Neglect, and the Foundation for Practice. It's put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth, and Families, Children's Bureau, and the Office on Child Abuse and Neglect. It's 114 pages long, PDF download from childwelfare.gov, and you can get that at www.childwelfare.gov/pubs/user manuals /foundation/foundation.pdf, and that'll bring you to that actual PDF. And we're on page 25. That's where we left off. So yeah, I'm glad that you can be here with me. I appreciate everybody who's tuning in, and this is, I'm just so grateful really to be able to do these shows and continue to do these shows. When I first started out, I had no idea how many shows I would be doing and whether or not anyone would be listening, and it turns out that a lot of people are listening. There's over 8,000 shows listened to, and that's just amazing to me. I've done about 300 shows, and someone's listening, and a lot of you are my friends and advocates and survivors and really good friends, and I just appreciate you being here for me. And then there's a lot of other people listening that I don't even know who you are, and so I thank you so much for tuning in and listening and being part of this change. I really, this is why I'm doing these shows. I want to see a complete stop of child abuse. I want child abuse to be stopped, and ultimately, right? And so no child should have to suffer. I mean, it's sad enough when children suffer from, natural causes and other things like diseases and whatnot, and they're suffering in a sickness or illness, and that's been, that they have genetically or that came on them, and that is just so sad. And but then when you see parents and caregivers and other family members and child sexual predators hurting children and killing children, that's really sad as well. It just breaks my heart. And abuse is just not talked about. You know what I mean? It's just not. No one wants to talk about it, and it's so hard to listen to. And I know, but we have to talk about it if we're going to stop it. If we're going to make the changes that we need to make as a society in our own communities, in our own homes, then we need to talk about it, and we need to stop hiding behind a whole lot of excuses and hiding behind a whole lot of denial. Abuse is happening, and it's out there, and it's who's behind it is a whole lot of children who are suffering, and this has got to stop. These are people that attend your churches. These are people that attend your. These are school teachers. These are doctors and nurses and lawyers. These are stay-at-home moms. These are career women, business women. These are businessmen, construction workers that are abusing children, and they look like pretty upstanding citizens during the day when they're at work. They're the greatest people to be around. But when they go home and they beat on their children and sexually abuse them and do horrible things to them, and then they show up back to work the next day, and everybody just thinks nothing about their character that could possibly lead them to believe that they would be abusers. And, this is absolutely sick, and it's got to stop. And the only way we're going to do that is by everyone getting involved and making sure that everyone knows the signs and symptoms of all the different types of abuse, and then get involved within your local communities and other groups who are doing some good work, and raise your voice and get active and help to make a difference for these children. Because this is it's sad, it's wrong, it's completely stoppable. Abuse is a choice. And so we have to get people to change the way they feel about how they're going to treat their children. And that's why I'm doing these shows. So, I'm not a professional counselor or therapist or anything. I don't hold any professional certificates in those areas. I study child rights, human rights. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And I study, I'm in between courses actually at MRU here in Calgary. And when I get the money to be able to go back and continue my courses, then I will. In the meantime, I keep studying and just keep looking for information, and I found, that I thought, hey, I should pass this information on, and, what I find that is helpful or useful, and it seems to be good information to me, and that's why I'm doing these shows. So I appreciate everybody for being here. Abuse is a hard topic to listen to. It's a hard topic to talk about, but, it has to be talked about. But ultimately, you're responsible for what you listen to, and if you feel that the show would trigger you or cause you to be upset or feel uncomfortable, you have to turn it off because you have to listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you and, make the decision on whether or not you should be listening to the show. There's a lot of adult content on my shows. And I just ask that young people under the age of 18 have someone listen to the show with you, and that way they can help you decide whether or not you should be listening to it. And so we'll get right into the show here. I wanted to look at, this is page 23 of this actual PDF, general definitions by type of maltreatment. And they're talking about, the different types, which is physical, sexual, neglect, and psychological. And we went through most of it, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse and whatnot, physical neglect, delay in health care, abandonment, expulsion, inadequate supervision, and other physical neglect, and educational neglect. We finished off with that. We have here permitted drug or alcohol abuse. I think that one, I did talk a little bit about that on Monday night, and then we'll start with this next one, which is permitted other maladaptive behavior, which is, they list here, encouragement or permitting of other maladaptive behavior. For example, chronic delinquency, severe assault under circumstances where the parent or caregiver has reason to be aware of the existence and seriousness of the problem but does not intervene. And this can happen with parents and especially teenagers, young teens, even older teens, right? It happened in my family. My brother, just for example, one of my brothers was a drug user, and he wanted to go and rob a pharmacy, and he held a knife to my sister's throat and wouldn't put the knife down. It was saying he would kill her if she didn't take him and drive him to this pharmacy to rob it, and she didn't want to go, obviously, right? So my mom didn't call the cops or anything. My mom just told me, because my brother would listen to me. She said she had me talk to my brother and try to talk my brother out of harming my sister. So this is the kind of thing that can happen within families, and it's very unfortunate when it does. Where they just allow maladaptive behaviors, you know what I mean, and allow these behaviors that that really shouldn't be happening within the home, right? And so it's actually a form of abuse. It's a form of neglect, because that should never be allowed to happen. The parents have to be in control, and they have to be the ones to set the rules and the boundaries, and for the safety of all the family members, right? I mean, no child deserves to have another sibling hold a knife to their throat and say they're going to kill them if they don't take them to rob a store. I mean, this is absolutely craziness. But the thing is my brothers did not have, my brother especially, this one that did this, he was very much emotionally damaged from the abuse within the family. And so we know this sort of thing can happen, right? It's horrible. Refusal of psychological care, refusal to allow needed and available treatment for a child's emotional or behavioral impairment or problem in accordance with a competent professional recommendation. So it's just refusing to get psychological care for your children, right? If they needed some therapy or treatment, right? These are all types of emotional neglect, I guess. Inadequate nurturing or affection, marked inattention to the child's needs for affection, emotional support or attention. And that happens a lot. You know what I mean? Parents quite often will neglect their children emotionally. They're just not nurturing. They don't have time for them. They don't make time for them. And possibly because they're a single-parent family. They just don't have the resources. They don't have the emotional strength, really, after they work a full day and try to support that family, to give a lot of nurturing or affection because they're tired, you know what I mean? And so sometimes it's brought on by circumstances like that. And that's why it's so important for people to get help, and not just think, well, I can do this by myself, I can do this, and try to struggle through it. I've actually known a lot. I've never been a single parent because I lost my baby, right? So I've never been a parent. But I've actually known a lot of people who were single parents and how hard it was just watching them do what they did, you know what I mean, to raise their child and to raise their children. And the work that was involved in that with little or no support from family members. And it was hard on them. It was hard on their children. And, of course, they wanted the best for their children. But, in the meantime, there were things that were lacking because they couldn't do what they wanted to be able to do for that child. You know what I mean? And so it's so important, with it, that people just realize that there is help out there. Just have to start looking around, especially with the beauty of technology, with the internet. Even if you don't have a computer, you can go to the library and use theirs. You can, if you have a telephone, you can phone up parenting associations and get information on how to get support for a single-parent family. And there's help out there, and sometimes it's not the right help. So then what you have to do is keep looking for the right help, right? There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, it's more shameful to not get help, right? Because then you're putting your family at risk and of neglect and abuse, and yourself, you're not getting any support, and that's not fair to the other parent. It's not fair to the parent as well in this kind of, this type of situation, right? And we see lots of that. It's just due to the stress of having to do everything, right? And I can imagine how hard that would be, and trying to make it in this world with a family and trying to raise this family on your own and with no real support, right? So that's why it's so important for people to realize there is support out there, but you got to look for it and you got to seek it out, make the phone call, and don't allow yourself to go downhill and spiral into a mess, and allow your family being destroyed because you wouldn't reach out and get some help. It's very important for parents to get help when they need help, because they could save themselves, they could save their family. And it's ultimately up to the parents to save their own families. You can't expect the kids to do it. You can't expect a 10-year-old child to save the family. You know what I mean? It isn't going to happen. It's up to the parents, and it all falls on the parents' shoulders. And that's the way it goes. That's the way it is, and that's the way it should be. You are the adults in the situation, and we are the adults in the situation. We have to make sure that we're doing the right thing by our children, right? So we have to get them help if they need help. We have to get help if we need help, and stop playing this game of Superwoman, Superman, I can do it, and stressing out and taking our angers and frustrations out on children, right? It's not their fault. And they say here, chronic or extreme spouse abuse. This is another form of emotional neglect. Exposure to chronic or extreme spouse abuse or other domestic violence in the child's presence. And that's very damaging. I actually talk a lot about that and have seen some great articles on it from www.familyviolence.alberta.ca. That's a great website regarding family violence and what it does to children when they actually see their parent being violent towards the other parent, or towards the children, and it's very, very hard on them. And so it's very important to get some help, right? And be aware that you're arguing and you're are fighting, right? If we were fighting it with our partner or boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever, and the children saw this, it's very, very hard on them to see this. Even if the abuse is not directed towards them, it will affect them. And that's something everybody needs to know, and it's a serious thing. And it will affect them. It will affect the way they feel about themselves, about the way they feel about you, the parents, the way they feel about life in general, and the fact that, their world becomes a scary place. It can cause all kinds of problems, right? So it's very important to get help. Delay in psychological care, they talk about failure to seek or provide needed treatment for a child's emotional or behavioral impairment or problem that any reasonable layman would have recognized as needing professional psychological attention. I think I might have already read that one. And I'll just scroll down here. They talk about, there's a spotlight on chronic neglect. And This PDF is awesome. There's some really good information here. This is more updated. It's from 2003. Believe it or not, that's updated. A lot of the articles you see out there, especially PDF manuals and whatnot for child abuse prevention and whatnot, are all from like 1996 or 1997. And so 2003 is better, right? It's some more current information, even though we really need. I have seen some stuff out there from 2010. I just happen to like this one. It talks a lot about the family, and I think that's if we're going to heal, if we're going to stop child abuse, we're going to have to heal the family. We can't remove all the children from all the homes. Where are we going to put them? You know what I mean? We have to fix families. We have to fix parents. Parents are really the ones that need the psychological help, you know what I mean? And children need the physical nurturing and the physical help and the psychological help. And the parents just need to stop what they're doing and stop abusing their children. And then we could all I could go home and I could stop talking, you know what I mean? I could find something else to talk about. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous that we have to keep doing this year after year. I'm just coming up behind a whole lot of other advocates who have been doing this for tens and tens and tens of years, who have been trying to make this difference here, and have been making a difference. And I just want to be one more voice right behind theirs to back them up, and to keep this thing going, because this is ridiculous that this is still happening in our society today. It's 2010. We need to wake up and smell the coffee and stop this mess. This is ridiculous, and it's killing our children, and it's killing our country, to be honest with you. Spotlight on chronic neglect. One issue in defining child neglect involves consideration of incidents of neglect versus a pattern of behavior that indicates neglect. And Susan J. Zuravin, Zuravin, from the University of Maryland at Baltimore School of Social Work, recommends that if some behaviors occur in a chronic pattern, they should be considered neglectful. Examples include lack of supervision, inadequate hygiene, and failure to meet a child's educational needs. And this suggests that rather than focusing on an individual incident that may or may not be classified as neglectful, one should look at an accumulation of incidents that may together constitute neglect. And I think that's very important, and I agree with her 100%. It says if CPS focuses only on the immediate allegation before them and not the pattern reflected in multiple referrals, then many neglected children will continue to be inappropriately excluded from the CPS system. For example, a family exhibiting a pattern of behavior that may constitute neglect might include frequent reports of not having enough food in the home, or keeping older children home from school to watch younger children. In most CPS systems, however, the criteria for identifying neglect focuses on recent, discrete, verifiable incidents. This is one study found that many children who had been referred to CPS for neglect did not receive services because their cases did not meet the criteria for incidents of neglect. And it also found, however, that all of these children had in fact suffered severe developmental consequences. In recognition of this issue, the Missouri Division of Family Services has assigned one of its CPS staff as a chronic neglect specialist. And this office defines chronic neglect as, quote-unquote, a persistent pattern of family functioning in which the caregiver has not sustained and or met the basic needs of the children, which results in harm to the child, quote-unquote. And the focus here is on the accumulation of harm, quote-unquote. And CPS and community agencies across the country are recognizing the importance of early intervention and service provision to support families so that neglect does not become chronic or lead to other negative consequences. A persistent pattern of family functioning in which the caregiver is not sustained or met the basic needs of the children, which result in harm to the child. This is huge. Neglect is huge. It's a very big problem. It's not talked about all that much because of the severity of child abuse as far as physical abuse goes and child sexual abuse. But neglect is actually much more common because it encompasses all of that, along with, there can be neglect in every case, just as the same as there is emotional abuse. If a child is being physically abused, they are neglected and they are being emotionally abused, as well as physically abused, psychologically abused, right? It all goes hand in hand. Although a child who's being physically abused might not be sexually abused. So that's the difference between all that. But they will suffer from neglect, from emotional abuse, from psychological damage, you know what I mean? And so that's why neglect is huge. And it just, so many children are neglected. And we don't quite often talk about that. As a society, nobody wants to talk about abuse, period. So, we really don't care about neglect. You have a little bit of better reaction from people when you're talking about abuse, like physical abuse or child sexual abuse. But when you talk about neglect, people are like, oh well, so what? Who cares if the child was neglected? It's abuse is what it is, and children will suffer greatly from neglect, and it's very harmful, very damaging. It's just damaging. It is part of the whole issue of child abuse, the emotional, psychological, damage, right, and some physical as well. And then if you throw in the child sexual abuse, you have a big mess. And so that's why it's so important for us, to get this information and then do something about it in whatever way that we can. Not everybody's got the resources to be handing out to organizations, I know this myself, right? And I volunteer. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I'm volunteering and I love it. And I wish I could do more, and hope to be able to do more in the future. But the thing is not everybody's got money to be pitching out, to help to get involved, right? But even if we donated like an hour or two a month of our time to help pass literature out to people, or go down to help at a domestic violence, center that's asking for volunteers, even an hour or two a month makes a big difference, right? Because you're just one more person to help bolster up the whole thing, right? I'm talking for myself too, right? We all need to do whatever we can, and not everybody has a lot of time, not everybody has a lot of money, but whatever we do, sharing posts, spreading information, really education is key. So, helping pass websites on that have some good information on there to people, and letting families know that, there is help out there, and if they're having a hard time, that they're to be sure and get that information. If you know of a family that's struggling, just kind of looking out for people in your own community, in your own neighborhood, in your own home. That's the main part, right? And to know the signs and symptoms. I think that's the biggest part. To know the signs and symptoms of all the different types of abuse, and then be prepared and understand how to report it, because you just don't know. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will have been abused sexually under the age of 18, and that really encompasses everything from unwanted sexual touching to assault, sexual assault, right, rape and whatnot, incest. So it's very important to know that a child could come to you and tell you and disclose that they have been abused, and if you don't know how to report it properly, then the case could be thrown out of court. If they can't use the material because you didn't report it properly, then the child could end up back in the home, and of course they could be killed, and this does happen, and we see it in the news. This is horrible. So, you want to know how to report child abuse. It's very simple. It's very easy. It's just a few steps to know, and a few important details to know about, and also all the signs and symptoms. And you can get all that from many websites. There's all kinds of great websites out there. I'm particularly biased about Dreamcatchers for Abused Children because that's who I volunteer for. So check out our website. We have a great website, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. There's a child abuse handbook on there. It's a free PDF download. You can get that from Sheeran Potter Books at lulu.com as well. It's called the Child Abuse Handbook. It was compiled by Donna Shear and Sandra Potter, and they put together this handbook. It's really for anyone, for everyone. They hope everyone will get a copy. It's free. They want everyone to have a copy. Read through it at least one time. If you read through it one time, you will have enough knowledge that if a child, I think so. I've read through it many times. But if you read through it, if all of us read through it one time, then we would have enough knowledge to recognize the signs and symptoms of abuse, of most of the types of abuse, right? So, we could really look out for the kids in our life and in our world, and make sure that they're not being abused, right? So it's just so important, and that's the main key, right? It's just, as far as prevention goes, right, is making sure the children in our own lives are protected and safe, and not being abused. That would stop child abuse, right? If we could get everybody to do that, it would stop child abuse. Now, the ones that are really sick and twisted and do these horrible things to their children, the whole community would kind of see that they were not getting the information, and they would zero in on them and now help them out. Because it just seems to me we have to do something. We just can't let it continue to go the way that it's going. Child abuse is on the rise. It's been reported that there's in some areas a 30% increase of cases and whatnot. They don't know if it's just because more people are reporting it or what, but it seems to be on the rise, and so many places don't have the resources to help these children, so they're on waiting lists and whatnot, these children. It's absolutely horrible. We have to stop this. Who's behind this? It's the parents, it's the caregivers, it's the relatives, it's the child sexual predators. But mainly, 90 to 95%, it's the family. It's either the parents or family friend or close family friend or close relative. Someone is abusing these children. And behind every abused child, there's at least one and possibly two abusers, right? So that's pathetic, because there's 60 million survivors of child abuse in the United States alone. So multiply that another time. That's 120 million abusers at least, right, if they're still living, if not more. Double it, 240 million abusers if both parents were involved. It's absolutely ridiculous. And these are people that walk around in our society. They go to the stores, they do their shopping trips, and then they go home and they kick the crap out of their kids. They burn their babies and stab them, throw them down the stairs, kill them, break their necks, hog-tie them for days and beat them and torture them. These are sick people. They then show up to work, and they're fine. Everything's great, but they killed their kid. And, until they get busted, right? And so this is pathetic, right? We really have to stop this. And I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but you know what, though? This is how serious this is. This is offensive. It's offensive to me that children are suffering like this. It's very offensive to me that these parents are doing this to their children. Every time I see another headline come out, it's that much more offensive to me. Because behind every headline is a child who is either dead or seriously damaged due to the abuse that they have had to suffer. If they actually survive it, they're probably in the hospital or they'll have a lifetime of survivor issues trying to learn how to grow and move past all this, right? So that's why it's so important that we do stop this as soon as possible, right? This article is great. They go on to talk about psychological maltreatment. And I think that we've got about 5 minutes left. We'll just touch on it. Psychological maltreatment, also known as emotional abuse and neglect, refers to a repeated pattern of caregiver behavior or extreme incidents that convey to children they are worthless, flawed, unloved, unwanted, endangered, or only of value in meeting others' needs. That's quote unquote. Summarizing research and expert opinion, Stuart N. Hart, PhD, and Marla R. Bressard, PhD, present 6 categories of psychological maltreatment. And they list them off here as spurning, which is examples as belittling, hostile, rejecting, and ridiculing. And they list terrorizing, which is threatening violence against a child, placing a child in a recognizably dangerous situation. That's terrorizing. And then there is isolating, which is confining the child, placing unreasonable limitations on the child's freedom of movement, restricting the child from social interactions. And they list exploiting or corrupting, which is modeling antisocial behaviors such as criminal activities, encouraging prostitution, permitting substance abuse, right? Denying emotional responsiveness, which is ignoring the child's attempts to interact, failing to express affection. And mental health. Medical and educational neglect. They list refusing to allow or failing to provide treatment for serious mental health or medical problems, ignoring the need for services for serious educational needs. And to warrant intervention, psychological maltreatment must be sustained and repetitive. For less severe acts such as habitual scapegoating or belittling, demonstrable harm to the child is often required for CPS to intervene. So quite often they cannot even intervene in a situation where a child is being emotionally abused. It's so hard to prove is why. And you'd have to literally have videotapes of somebody doing this to their child day after day after day, or week after week or whatever, right? And so it's hard to prove in court, and you have to have documentation. And that's why they say there has to have been demonstrable harm to the child. It is often required for CPS to intervene, it says. So that's unfortunate because so many parents just love to make their children feel bad. And I know because I grew up with 2 of them. And I grew up actually with lots of my friends had parents like that too, who just loved to hurt their children. It was the thing that they wanted to do. Abuse is a choice. I hope everybody realizes that. It's very serious that, that we all really understand that abuse is a choice. Abusers don't have to do that to their children, but they just do. And it's a choice, and they can stop at any time. Right? So we can't really feel all that much sorry for abusers, right? But we really need to protect children. Well, I got about a minute left, so thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll pick up here on Friday night. I'm hoping I don't have to cancel this show. I've got a commitment that I might have to change the show time. I might go to a little bit later show. I don't think I'll cancel it, but I might have to move it to a later time. And take care of yourselves, everybody. Have a great night, and I'll be back on tomorrow with at 6 o'clock a.m., one child abuse survivor to another. and I'll be glad to be there again tomorrow morning, and then tomorrow, then I'll begin on Friday morning, same time, same place, one child abuse survivor to another. Friday night, Donna Shear and myself will be on 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. Thanks everybody for being here, and just make sure that you get the signs and symptoms and know what to look for, and we could save a child's life, right? This is the main thing. So have a great night, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.